So I'm so happy that Vladimir Milov has come to Sweden. It's not the first time here, but we're happy, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to say. And I think someone maybe will help you with your PowerPoint.
Thank you very much, Minister, and really very honored to be here and to be able to comment on the Russian economy. A lot of mythology here, and I really wanted to congratulate Torbjörn and colleagues with great reports, really a breath of fresh air. When you read a lot of Western headlines, Russia is booming, exceptionally record low unemployment and all that stuff. The first of the things that really put value into this report, because it really links Russian government propaganda efforts with analyzing Russian statistics. Because what Russia tends to do is it tends to cherry pick on the most attractive numbers that they have and to hide everything else. And that is a deliberate propaganda effort. So like whenever you read a headline at Bloomberg, The Economist, IMF, wherever, sorry, don't want to offend anybody, but whenever you read a headline that Russian economy is thriving, doing well in spite of sanctions, be aware that this is wittingly or unwittingly assisting the official Russian government propaganda narrative. The purpose of this narrative is very, very simple: to convince the Western public opinion and policy-making community that the sanctions policy adopted so far was wrong, is not yielding any results, and should be reconsidered. So I think what is the important point here is to look into much of the nuance. So again, congratulations. This is actually the first time I hear in a detailed Western analysis the mention of ROMIR as an agency which measures real consumer price inflation. ROMIR is effectively a think tank, an entity which measures anything related to consumer market. It's apolitical. It's not like a general polling agency which asks people questions, do you support Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin? Nothing of that. Really politically benign. They monitor consumer prices. And they do a regular indicator which is called FMCG index. That's fast-moving consumer goods. It's basically everything you see in a grocery store. 22%. Year on year. In latest indicator, you can actually go right now to the website, romir.ru, 22% year on year in August 2024 versus August 2023. So basically there's so much more to the Russian economy than meets the IMF. Again, sorry, don't want to offend anybody, but we need to understand that it's complicated. And we need to go really beyond just a handful of macro indicators to understand some very serious underlying challenges and new structural processes are taking place within the Russian economy. It's clearly insufficient to measure it by just a standard, 2, 3, 4, 5 macro indicators. So if we really want to assess the effectiveness of sanctions, we should go beyond that and scratch the surface a little bit. Now, GDP. It's also really confusing when you read all these triumphant headlines in the Western media. Russian GDP is growing 3–4% a year, defying all expectations. Well, okay, what we need to do is read the Russian official commentary, which says in August this year, last reported, GDP growth was 2.4%. In annual terms, versus 5.4 in the first quarter. First quarter 5.4, August 2.4. So that's a slowdown, quite notable. Next year, a Russian official central bank, so my best advice is just listen to what the Russian officials are saying themselves. A Russian official central bank baseline scenario forecast for next year, 0.5 to 1.5% GDP growth. So all this 3–4% GDP growth that we are reading about, that's basically a yesterday's story. This is clearly, first, a bounce-back effect from the initial plunge after the first sanctions were introduced in 2022, plus some grant Russia received from boosting of the oil prices in that first year of the full-scale invasion, when the oil embargo was not there, the price cap was not there, and Russia received about 3 trillion rubles of extra revenue because of the temporary increase in the oil prices. If we take that out, all the subsequent bounce back in GDP does not look so impressive at all. And the next factor is the massive injection of budget money into military industries, which is, as Minister correctly pointed out, temporary and unsustainable. Because, again, I think the best way to assess what's really going on in the Russian economy is to read the transcript of central bank press conferences on interest rate. They are also available in English at their website. Last time it was 13th of September. Next one is coming on the 25th of October when we have a real assessment of what's going on. What they are saying is the key factor that is contributing to persistent inflation that cannot be calmed down by tight monetary policies is basically a supply shock. Supply is not catching up with demand. So they inject all this money, but supply, including military supply, which is flattening out. The curve of growth in military production is rapidly flattening out because they can't buy all the technology, equipment, machinery because of sanctions. So they keep injecting that money. It only leads to high inflation, but it does not lead to output growth. Yes, I'm not inventing this. This is per Elvira Nabiulina, the chairman of the Russian Central Bank. And now budget spending, yet again, they released the new draft federal budget for 2025, and yet again they try to convince us that they will be able to hold the deficit within 1 trillion rubles and the expenditure growth next year within 5%. Never happened during the course of the 3-year war. The deficit were always exploding well beyond 3 trillion. Same happens this year, exceeded plan adopted a year ago by more than 2 times. They cannot contain it because, again, spending the available reserves that they got is the only way to sustain this 3–4% of GDP growth that we're talking about. Reserves are depleting rapidly. Currently available so-called liquidity portion of the National Wealth Fund, which is yuan plus gold, this is just by slight 30% above the planned deficit of this year. So by January 1st, they will approach, if they continue to spend the National Wealth Fund to finance the deficit, by January 1st, they will have like next to nothing left there. And central bank admits in one of the recent publications that in 2025, liquidity part of the National Wealth Fund may be exhausted. This is official language. Again, I'm not inventing anything. So I'm finishing here. We'll be happy to take questions, but there's so much more to look at, and Western policymakers who are involved in analyzing the effects of the sanctions really deserve better than the mainstream analysis that we have. So I truly welcome this report, which goes into a lot of nuance and detail. Bottom line, Putin still has significant resources to wage the war, but it's waning. The corridor is narrowing pretty rapidly and visibly. You heard reports that Russia had again increased military spending for next year. True, but only by 26% year on year. It was 68% increase in military spending this year. So 2.5 times down. It was 35% to 40% annual increase in 2022-2023. So next year is going to be the lowest rate of increase of military spending since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, plus adjusted to even official 8–9% inflation. That's just 15% indexation of military spending in real terms, which is next to nothing compared to what we hear, that they need to spend so much more on military production, that military industries are working with near zero profitability. As per Sergei Chemezov, the head of Rostech, the biggest arms-producing corporation, that they need to index salaries because of inflation, because of increased pay for signing a contract with Ministry of Defense, which is increased by the day. I think it's over 3 million rubles now. They need to fix the broken supply system because we hear more and more official recognitions that the soldiers are buying everything themselves. And on top of that, 15% indexation of military budget in real terms for next year, it's a sign of scarcity. It's not the sign of strength. So again, we should discuss more of the nuance. Western policymakers should be aware of all that to calibrate the sanctions. And of course, there's plenty of room to make them better and more efficient, because Putin's been really good at circumventing and all that stuff. But there is a light at the end of this tunnel. There is a way forward, and Russian economy really feels the hit of sanctions, which is progressing over time. And again, I would agree with Torbjörn that a lot, if not anything, depends on the Western actions, not on the Russians' ability to maneuver and self-sustain. So awareness of some real challenges and underlying problems is important. And again, in this regard, this report is brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Warm applause. We are truly happy and honored that you're here, and I'm sure you will have a lot of questions.